All right, hey guys, this is April 1st. Not April 1st. Tuesday, April 28th. This is algebra 1 is what I meant to say. And so what we're going to do today, on the sheet I have laid out page 425 through 428, 1 through 30. I'm probably going to break this up and give y'all 2 days to do it. And so basically bump everything back a day, just because this, I don't know that y'all are going to do, it's just going to be a lot. And so if we have to bump it back and give you 2 days on this lesson, we will, and we'll try it. And so just plan on that. So what we're going to do today, this is adding and subtracting with different denominators. And so what happens is, not that. We're on page 425. This is least common denominator. And so like number 1, we're just going to jump straight into it. Number 1 is basically just gives you the number. So this is the least common denominator like we've always done. Basically you want to find a least common multiple, and so, or least common denominator. And so what we're going to do is basically say, okay, for each of these numbers, 12, 18, and 24, we're basically going to factor them down into their primes. Okay? And so what we would do is we would do factor 12 down. It could be 3 times 4, and then it would go to 2 and 2, and so we have a 3 times 2 times 2. Again, y'all should be good with this. 18 we're going to break down into a 9 times 2, and then the 9 we're going to break down into a 3 and 2, and a 3 and 3, and then the 2 is left over. And then 24 we're going to break down into 6 and 4. The 4 would break down into 2 and 2. The 6 would break down into 3 and 2. And so what we're going to do for this is you're going to use basically the numbers that they have in common, that they make up. And so if you look on page 426, they kind of give you another example to go along with it. And so what you're going to do is to write the LCD, you basically list all of the ones that they have in common that they could be missing as well. And so if you look at it, this one has 2 2s, this one has 1 2, this one has 3 2s, and so I'm going to have to use 3 2s. It's got to be the highest number they have in common, and so the highest number. So it'd be 2 times 2 times 2. So I use 3 2s, and so I'm going to go ahead and use basically all of the 2s up, so that way I don't have to look at them. Now I have to use the 3s. Okay, which one had the highest amount of 3s? Well, this one had 1, this one had 2, that one only had 1, and so I'm going to have to use 2 3s. So it's the highest number that the one of them had. And so that's 2 times 2 times 2, and then I'm going to do 3 times 3. And so this is really 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, so 9 times 8 would be 72. So 72 would be the common denominator, the least common denominator. So again, you do the prime factorization, which y'all should be good at, and then you're going to do, okay, which one had the most of one of the primes, and then whichever one had the most, you're going to use that for that number. So this one had 3 2s, so I used the 3 2s. Then I moved to the 3, which one had the most 3s? This one had 2 3s. And so that was the most, so I used 2 3s, then you multiply them together. So that is how it works with numbers. The next one I have deals with variables. And so what happens is you're basically looking at the factors and saying, okay, which ones, you have to account for all of them. So if it repeats, it's fine. You're not really concerned if it repeats. You just want to make sure you have all of them to the highest degree. And so, for example, notice you have this x minus 3, and this one has an x minus 3. That's fine. They both have 1. You would want to take the highest amount. So if this one had 2x minus 3s and that only had 1, you would take the 2x minus 3s the same way you took this one that had the 3 2s. So you just take the highest amount. And so this one only has 1, and so that only has 1. So your common denominator then is only using 1x minus 3. So those two are done. Notice this one has an x plus 4, that one doesn't, but we still have to use the x plus 4. And so you would do the x plus 4. And then this one has an x minus 2, but that other one doesn't have an x minus 2, so we have to use it too. And so your common, this is number 5, and so your common denominator for number 5 would be the x minus 2, the x plus 3, no, it was x plus 3, or it was x minus 3, x minus 3, and then the x plus 4. So basically you have to account for all of them. I had to account for this x minus 3, that one already had it, so that's fine. This one had an x minus 2, so you have to account for it. Then you have to account for that x plus 4. And so that's how it would work. Again, what would happen if I added another x minus 3 out here to this one? Then now this one has two x minus 3s, and so you would just have to account for 2 of them then. Since this one had 2 and that only had 1, you still have to account for the 2 of them. And so you would just add another x minus 3 onto your answer. So the same way over here, we had the highest one that had a 3. The highest one had 3 2s, I mean. And so we had to use the 3 2s. Then we had the next one that had the 2 3s, and so we used the 2 3s. It's the same way, you just have to use each factor, and then you have to use the highest amount under the actual issue, under the problem. So that would help you with that. The next one we will do is I will look at number 11 here. Number 11 is basically just takes the next step and you're applying that. And so you have x plus 3 over x minus 4. And so x plus 3 over x minus 4. And so they went ahead and said, okay, we're going to set that equal to this other one. And so the other one has an x minus 4 and x plus 2. So the question is, what is the common denominator? What would be the common denominator? What are we trying to get it to? Well, they both have an x minus 4, so we're okay there. They both have that. Notice this one has an x plus 2. This one does not have an x plus 2. So what you do is you multiply by whatever's missing. Since this one is missing an x plus 2, this one has an x minus 4 and x plus 2, this one is missing the x plus 2, then you have to multiply by the x plus 2 to the top and bottom. And so when I multiply the x plus 2 to the bottom to make it x minus 4, x plus 2, so I'm basically just multiplying this one over here to that one. So x minus 4 times x plus 2. So notice all I did was take this one and multiply it to this one, that way they match. The whole point is to make all of these match. And since now they match, the only thing is I multiplied an x plus 2 on the bottom, so I then have to multiply an x plus 2 to the top. And so I would multiply an x plus 2 to the top. So notice now, to make this equal, what would have to go up here? It would have to be the x plus 3 times the x plus 2. So my question mark would be an x plus 3 times an x plus 2. And again, going back through it, the problem was our denominator had an x plus 2 here. It was missing the x plus 2 there, so I had to multiply the x plus 2 times the x minus 4 to make sure the denominators match. Once the denominators match, I then had to multiply the numerator times x plus 2, so that's what I multiplied by. And so that would give me a new numerator of x plus 3 times x plus 2. The last few here, 17 and 18, is going to be dealing with finding what we got. It says change the equivalent fractions, having the least common denominator. So you're basically going to walk through that. And so they give you the numbers. And so the first thing we have to do is find the least common denominator. So we have to see what factors would they all add up to there. And so you're going to do the prime factorization. You're basically going to do first what we did over here on this one. So you're going to do the prime factorization. So you're going to prime factor 9 and get 3 and 3. Prime factor 16, you get 4 and 4, and then 2 and 2, and then 2 and 2. So that has 4 2s. Then the 15, you would do a 5 and a 3. Okay, now I'm going to look at it and say, okay, which one has the most of each? And so when I'm looking at 2s, this one has 4 2s, so I have to use 4 2s. I have to use the one that happens the most. And so I would use 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, then I'm going to look at my 3's. Okay, this one had 2 3's, so I have to use 2 3's because that was the highest one. And then this one has a 5, so I have to use 1 5. So when you do this, what do we have here? It would be, where am I at? Hold on. So you can do it basically any way here. So you can do it all the way through, multiply that out, and then basically you're just going to see what they have missing. So that's one way. Another way you can do it, did I put that down right? No, it's not 16, it's 6. No wonder we're messed up. It's about that's a big number, bigger than I thought it would be. So scratch that. That was right for the 16, but that's not what it was, it's a 6. And so 6 would be 2 times 3. So same thing, 9 factors to 3 and 3, 6 to 2 and 3, 15 to 5 and 3. Then you're going to look for which one has the most. This time there's only 1 2. And then the 2 3's for the 9, because that's the most 3's. And then the 1 5 for that. So that's how that would work and for this problem. And so then you just multiply. 2 times 9 would be 18. And then 18 times 5 would be 90. And so our common denominator would be 90. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So notice what happens when we do this. Just to make sure you understand the concept. It's all to make sure you get the concept. So the denominator is going to be a 90. So the question is, what do you do to a 9 to get a 90? Well, you multiply by 10. So if you multiply 9 times 10 to get a 90, then you multiply 5 times 10 to get a 9. To 5 times 10 to balance it. So it'd be 10 over 9. Then the question is, okay, what do you do to a 6 to get to a 90? Well, to get 6 to a 90, you're going to multiply by 15. And so since you multiply 6 times 15 to get to the 90, you have to multiply the 1 times 15. And so it'd be 15 over 90 for that one. And then the question is, what do you do times 15 to get to a 90? The 15 to get to a 90 would be 15 times 6. And so if you multiply the 15 times 6, you have to multiply the 7 times 6. And 7 times 6 would be 42. And so again, once you have it factored and you know what the bottom's going to be, you just multiply it through. One thing to keep in mind, what actually happened, notice we had 2 3's and then we needed a 2 and a 5. So we multiplied this 5 times the 2 and the 5 that it was missing. Then this 6, we had this 2 and the 3, and so we multiplied it by it was missing a 3, and it was missing another 5, the 5. So we had to multiply this times the 1 times the 3, and the 5 that it was missing. So you're basically just multiplying it by what it's missing. And then, so notice here, this had a 5 and a 3. We needed 2, 3, 3, 5, and so it was missing a 2 and another 3, and so we wound up multiplying 7 times 2 times 3, which was 6. And so that's what you're going to do. 18, look at it real quick. So 18 says 7 over x and then 2 over 3x. And so the 7 over x and the 2 over 3x, we need a common denominator. And so the first thing is, what would it be? So notice you take what they have in common, what would it be? So factors of 3x are 3 and x. Then the factors of x are just x. And so notice that you have to account for at least one x. And then this one has a 3, that one doesn't, so the highest number you have to account for is the 3. And so we need both of them to be basically 3x. And so notice this one already is 3x, this is just an x, so the question is, what do you do to the x to make it a 3x? Well, of course, you would multiply by 3. And so if we multiply the 3 to x, then we have the x by 3, then we have to multiply the 7 by 3 as well. And so what you're going to do is basically you're going to do x times 3, and since we did that, we have to also multiply 7 by 3. And so that would end up being 21 over 3x would be that one, and then this other one is just going to stay the same. It already has the x and already has the 3x, so it would just be 2 over 3x. So basically you just have to make sure they each have the common denominator. This one was missing the 3, so we had to multiply by 3 to top and bottom. And so that's pretty much what you're going to do. So for today, I'm going to go ahead and call the audible and just have y'all work through that. So I need, basically I want you to do 1 through 20. So just work on 1 through 20 today, and then we will audible and finish it up and kind of move forward tomorrow. So do 1 through 20 on page 427.